Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. In this video, what I'd like to talk about are if-then-else statements that you can do in a structured expression. And what you're looking at here is the result of an if-then-else statement. So in this example here, what I wanted to do was take a range of values, so multiple ranges of values that were an input here, and actually output something else depending upon what these values were. So in this case, I wanted to say that if it's less than the value of 20 in this percentage range, so 15, then it would output a 1. Or if it's above 20 but less than 40, then it would output a 2. Or if it was greater than 40 but less than 60, then it would output a 3, and you get the idea. So how do you go about doing something like this? Well, you can use the structured expressions and built-in operations to do if-then-else statements. So let's take a look at that. But first, we'll go back to looking at where this started. And this started with a stereotype and then also a derived property customization. So this here is an example of how you can create customizations that will output different values based on the input values. And those input values could be values that are attributes of a stereotype. So in this example, notice how we have the risk stereotype, and at the very bottom, we have the likelihood percent, and that is typed as a real number. So anytime we input one of those, what we are going to do is output something with the derived property that is one of the attributes of the customization. So notice in the risk customization, the customization target is the risk stereotype that's below it. So we have the risk stereotype as our customization target. Then I added a derived property here that is called the likelihood. So this will be the output. And really that's when you use these derived properties, or when you'd like to output something based on some inputs. And these do not have to be based on stereotypes. There could be other things that you use in order to create your derived properties. However, in this case, this is based off of a stereotype. So what we do is we delve into this derived property specification. You can add more of these by simply going to the smart manipulator option that you have and creating a derived property specification. And that would give you the option to create a new one. But let's delve into this. So to get into the structured expression window from here, you can right click on your derived property specification and go to the specification. And then if you notice, I've already done this one, but you would go down to the expression section and expand that open. And then I'm going to talk through the logic of creating this, but if you were to create a new one, you would go to create operation and then go to operation from model. And then you can either go to the list or you can type in a specific one. So you have all of these specific built-in operations that you can use. And in this case, I'm starting out the if-then-else, which is this here. And these can be embedded. You can have other if-then-else's embedded. So if, then, if, or else if, basically an else if embedded into that. And they can go on forever. There doesn't necessarily have to be a one else statement. It can be else if something else. So that's what I use in this case. But what I'll do is actually expand this one open that I've already done, so you can kind of get an idea of how you could do something similar. So let me pull that one back up here. That way you get an idea of what this looks like when you go to create it. So let's say we were to start with a new if-then-else statement. What it gives you is this condition equals false, then null, else null, right? So these are all the fields that you have to work with. So if condition could be true, you could toggle that to true, then what, right? Else something else. So in this case, the condition that I started with was actually another built-in operation. So what I did is said condition and then went here to reset, right? And then you can actually create another operation from your model. So if you null that out and create a new operation, you can say less than or equals, you can say less than, say greater than or equals, or just greater than. So in this case, I said less than, but you could use less than or equals as well. And then notice it does this A equals null, B equals null. So for this, what you actually want to do is tell B is the actual value that you're going to tell it that if it's less than what, right? So that's what the B field is for here. And then you would typically use an integer or a real number to state what that is. So in this case, I said it's a real number and it's less than 20. However, for the A, you actually have to tell your model or tell Cameo where to find this value. So for that, you'll use a meta chain, but you actually have to start with a first operation and then feed the first operation a meta chain. So what you'll do anytime you're dealing with numbers in here, you always want to use first operation. So A equals null, we're going to change that to operation from model and use a first operation. And then we will say, okay. And then notice it gives you the input equals null. So this is where you actually enter the meta chain. So now instead of operation from model, we're going to go to a meta chain this time. And then what I did was insert, and it starts out with this risk element already. And then for the property, what you'll do is simply type in that attribute of your stereotype or the attribute of your customization. In this case, it's the attribute of the stereotype because that's the input, right? So if the input, which is this %, is less than this value of 20, then we're going to output a specific number. And in this case, it's another real number, which was 1. So that's the first part of this. Now we will expand this open because that's what you see up here already. But then the else that I used is this other condition. So instead of going with an or statement and making the next range of values part of an or, where you could say, if it's greater than or equals 20, or if it's less than or equals 40, then something else. It can get very complicated when you start delving into the or statements that are embedded in if then else statements. But what's nice about this is you don't actually need to do that. You can actually stack up less than statements. So you could say that this first range, as long as it's less than 20, output a 1. And then the next one, you could say if it's less than 40, output a 2. And that first one that you did that's less than 20 will actually trump it, if so to speak, if that value is less than 20. So you can simply stack up less than values, and then at the very end you can simply say if it's greater than something else, then use some other value, right? So that's what I did in this case. And if you notice, we have else is another embedded if then else statement, and that's how you get in else if. So else, I reset that. So down here what you would do is you would go to else equals, you would reset, or you can simply go to operation from model and do another if then else statement here, say okay, and then you're back to where you started. So then what you see that I did in this case is embed that if then else statement, and then the condition is another less than operation that uses a first operation with the meta chain to the exact same input. But if it's the input is a different value this time, so in this case, if it's less than 40, then we output a 2. And that's why you see this pattern is repeated. If it's less than with the first, less than 60, then output 3. Another if then else statement with the condition less than, first operation with the meta chain to the same stereotype attribute. If it's less than 80, then output a real number of 4. And then at the end of this, it's simply else 5. So that is how you can go through and create an if then else statement. And you want to make sure that you have all of your values typed appropriately. And notice the type for this derived property specification is actually the UML primitive type of real. It's not the SysML extension that is a value type real. So that is something to pay attention to if you work with these, is that you want to use those primitive types of your integers or real numbers. And then getting back over to this, as you saw when we started this out, that works out very well. So if we were to input a number for 81, then it outputs a 5. And that's exactly what we wanted for this specific if then else statement. If you have any questions on any of this, please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks.